How you doing?
I'm really good. I'm sort of in the craze of finishing up our series finale. And so it's this ephemeral moment in time where I'm just, soaking it up, working these long days, but never been more I don't know, sort of nostalgic for what's still transpiring in front of me.
Sure.
Hmm.
Now obviously you can't talk about season five at all, I'm assuming, but I'm
Yeah.
curious if you are if Annie's overall character arc
Hmm.
is what you expected it would be going into this series to begin with.
It's not, but in ways that like continuously delight me. I mean, first and foremost, because this comes to mind because it was more recent, the shapeshifter component was completely and totally a surprise, of course. And I usually get like notified via our showrunner, Kripke, about certain storylines and certain significant plot points in advance so that I'm aware of them so I can start preparing. But that scared me so much because I wasn't sure if I would be able to do it in a way that I really needed to for myself, for everyone a part of the show to do that storyline justice. It was so challenging. But even actually when I booked the part, the script that I received was not the script that we ended up shooting. And I booked the role, and true to his nature, our boss and showrunner, as I was saying, Kripke, he called me up and he said to me, just so you're aware, I'm going to include a storyline that, if okay with you, entails something that mirrors the Me Too issue going on in the real world and the Me Too movement. And so that wasn't a part of the script that I initially read and part of the script that I auditioned for. So that was a surprise. And I
Okay.
was like, that to me was symbolic of what we were about to take on together with this character. Someone who was iconoclastic and someone who's you were gonna put in a box and she was gonna break every box that you put her into. So she's been surprising, but not arbitrarily so. She's been surprising in these really pleasant ways that I just feel fortunate enough to be able to play and that feel emotionally justified, that feel circumstantially justified, and not just put in circumstances to surprise you.
Sure.
It feels fun and yeah, Eric Kripke is really good at that specifically.
Where do you think Annie stands morally at the end of season four?
I feel like the mandatory precursor to um standing your ground in terms of whatever stance that might be. For her, she is a moral character, right? We can both externally observe her and say that she is one of maybe two or three or four characters that are actually good in a very gray show. But
Sure.
generally speaking, like if there's a bad and there's a good, she's on the good side. The mandatory precursor is knowing who you are and having a firm sense of identity. And her season four is literally and metaphorically losing that. She loses her powers. She loses like who she is, and she sees herself quite literally as a reflective piece in the shapeshifter. And so she finds who she is, and that is what we learn to be the essential precursor to showing up for situations that call for her morals, right? So the question is she able to hang on to that for season five?
Sure.
As we've discussed, there are many surprises, and there are no linear trajectories with these characters, and that's what I love about it. Is it's this show that entails superheroes that's ultimately so human and so anti-formula and so centered around the human condition and what it is to grasp morals and conditioning and or lack thereof in terms of
Right.
morals. So yeah, it's about identity and it's about um, whether or not she's able to hang on to what she needs to accomplish her goals, I think.
I spoke with you in the cast a few years ago during season three, and we discussed the duality of portraying Annie and Starlight.
Mm.
Have you approached the character differently since that duality is really no longer relevant?
I have. I think that the lack of duality had her really confront some issues that she was going through because I think a lot of us, myself included, thought when she left the Seven and when she left Vought, here was this opportunity for her to explore who she is, and there would be some sort of sense of arrival. But like life, there is no sense of arrival, right? And it's not that neat. And then she's confronted with this concept, oh, maybe when I'm out of the Seven and I've been blaming a lot of my lack of identity on being in the Seven and not knowing how to find myself, that actually my lack of identity lies in my inability to confront certain components of myself that might contradict who I am, which we all do, I think, at a certain point, because once again, the human condition is a messy condition to live in. I think basically, that duality is then confronted in sort of a merging of dualities and in a much more nuanced way, right? The
Sure.
darkness, the lightness within her. And she has to accept, okay, the point is, I am not defined by my worst actions. I am defined by what I try and presently and earnestly do in each circumstance, micro or macro, that I enter myself into. Whether it's a room with firecracker or it's taking down Homelander, my intention is to leave every situation better than my perception of better than how I first encountered it.
Sure. You mentioned the shapeshifter. Did you tackle that as if you were portraying a different character?
I did 100%. But it was complete, but there was an added dimension to it because one thing that I don't think about, and it was a very cool, it was a really cool challenge to take on. But when I show up to set, there are a lot of sensorial triggers as Annie that I encountered that I took for granted. So, for example, I would show up to set and I will see like our camera operator, Liam, and that will sort of make me feel unbeknownst to me formally that like, okay, here I am as Annie. I'm showing up to set, the set that I've come on, that I've stepped onto since I was 23 years old. I've stepped onto it for almost a decade. I'm putting on the shoes that I wear as Annie. All of these little things that really subconsciously enter your psyche as these moments that just trigger you as stepping into a character on a daily basis. So that compounded with the physical like mannerisms that I as Erin have decided to take on as Annie, but even if you don't make intentional decisions,
Sure.
people will associate them with this character. And so I needed to watch myself. This was humbling, or I wanted to watch myself do errands throughout the house. So I videotaped myself and I watched myself in fast forward motion so I could transcend them.
Wow.
And it was so humbling because there were moments when I saw my mother that I had no idea that I would possess these certain mannerisms. And then in terms of these little daily sensorial triggers, I was trying to figure out a way that I could, because during the fight scene, for example, when I fight myself, I was going between those characters one after one. I was changing between them. There wasn't like 6 hours of Annie, 6 hours of the shifter. There was an hour of the shifter changing into Annie, and I did both sides of that fight to a metronome, and it was nuts. So I needed something that would abruptly slap me out of Annie. So I ended up listening to a podcast one day, and in the podcast there were a couple of dudes, and I don't remember why or what the exact details were, but they were weightlifters. And I was trying to figure out physical ways to step into this character that was sort of almost like Hulk-esque in her anger, but also she was a bit sadistic. And they're talking about smelling salts and how they use them for weightlifting. So I looked
Wow.
them up and I found out that they were legal. They're on Amazon if you're 21 and above. Or I was in Canada at the time and 19 and above. And so I was like, let me just try them because from what I understand, if weightlifters use them to sort of have this abrupt moment of strength, I want to see what that feels like. And sure enough, that ended up being my sensorial trigger to step into the shifter role
Wow.
because perfume wouldn't cut it. And usually I'll pick different perfumes for each season, each character, because I'm a nerd and I like that kind of trigger, but that was not enough for the shifter. So all of these little things interwoven as modalities to kind of prep me in a way that felt like, at least psychologically, it would slap Annie out of me. And it was more so just an antidote to my anxiety to do all of this prep. But it
Sure.
was funny. I will say that they hurt so badly. I do not recommend them. They're not,
Don't gotta
not
tell me
that
twice.
not that you're curious, not that anyone would be curious. It's a crazy thing to do, but it's like a slap in the soul. It really is.
You mentioned the actual fight itself. What was that? Did you have different types of choreography for each character?
Yeah, I did. That was very, very specific. Like, for example, the shifter, our brilliant stunt coordinator, John Koyama, and I figured out ways that I could walk as the shifter and that ways that I could even move my neck that would be more abrupt and sort of I studied the Alexander technique, which is based in studying different animals for each character for this character, and I'd never done that before.
Wow.
There was something sort of almost lizard-like in terms of the way she would move her neck and the way she would like specifically in the fight scene. I wanted to differentiate the way they fought these characters, and Annie was more innate to me, so I had to step outside of that once again. And John Koyama brilliantly choreographed it in a way where I, as the shifter, bit a chunk out of a man's neck and spit it out. So there were these little visceral, primal moments that made it very easy to strip myself of Fanny and step into the shifter. But I was insistent on that, and he really got that. And that's where we really developed this really cool working relationship because so much is founded in the physicality of each character in a way that I was really grateful to explore with this shifter role. But it was more so those moments, the subtle moments, turning my head around, eye moments when I would make eye contact with people and the way I would do it that would just in a way that actually didn't feel forced as well, which was difficult, felt motivated, but
Sure.
it was so much fun. I want to play another psycho killer for sure. It was more fun than I anticipated.
Would you say that was, I mean, Annie ultimately takes the shapeshifter's life, supposedly. There's rumors, online rumors that the shapeshifter's still alive. Was it a turning point for Annie, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that like we discussed, she needed to confront components of her identity that she almost or no, she totally used. She didn't use the seven to escape these confrontations. Circumstantially, she was unable to confront certain things because when you're busy dealing with chaos, it's easy to get lost in that noise and not confront the quiet room that you're then put into once the chaos lowers its
Right.
volume, right? So these other components of her personality became more pronounced. Firecracker comes around and confronts her about her past, and that adds to the volume that's increasing around her that she needs to deal with in order to kind of embrace who she is and her past. And so when she kills the shapeshifter, when she supposedly kills the shapeshifter, yeah, for sure, it's a metaphor, right? She's kind of I think that there is a perception of her, or so she believes, that the public has constantly been ripping apart, and that also factors into her identity crisis. How could it not, right?
Right.
It's up to her to become this sort of self intrinsically motivated version of herself as opposed to extrinsically motivated, which we all need to do, but she needs to do in a way that also mandates speed. You know, she needs to do it at an accelerated pace because it's a
Sure.
TV show. The circumstances are batshit and not
Yeah.
normal, right? So it's sort of this hyper extreme version of, I think, what we all do, whether it's a dark version of ourselves or a shameful version of ourselves. We need to figure out a way to incorporate them into ourselves in order to step into rooms as full people, which becomes such a mandatory process to just becoming who you are and becoming someone who therefore isn't just crowded by thoughts of self-doubt, you know?
Sure. You were given a lot more to play with this season, in the last season, at an emotional level. Can you just talk
Yeah.
about digging a little deeper into Annie?
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool to explore the dark components of Annie. So emotional components for sure, but we've seen that before. And so I wanted to make sure that nothing felt like there were no, I think that there is this thing where actors can feel like crying equates to good acting. So for me, it was very much things that need emotions that I wanted to play in a subdued way under the surface, because I think one of the primary things for myself, at least, that can happen when you're trying to contend with a lot of emotions that you're confused about is you can try and suppress them. So I wanted them to feel suppressed. So there was this new fabric to who she was, which was this like felt suppression of emotion without letting it come to the surface too much. And then in terms of like the shifter of it all, I think when I think of the shifter, I think of Schadenfreude in like incarnate. I think that this character just loved to inflict um not loved to inflict a discomfort and pain onto others, and the enjoyment and even like her sensuality that she would feel throughout it, that you saw come to life with her dynamic with Huey and the way she spoke about him and objectified him to Annie, I think was this weird but cathartic moment for the shifter where every body that the shifter enters is an opportunity to catharsize some theory that the shifter had on humanity and how ultimately humanity is this corrupt, fucked up, contradictory version of whatever we idealize it to be. So all around, it was a spectrum of emotions, and it was like a toolbox that I could play with,
Okay.
and different tools were I was able to use for the first time. It was really fun.
Would you say your personal connection to Annie has shifted over the course of the series?
Yeah, I would say it has. As I've grown, I think that like the fact that I am the age that Annie they decided this, but I think I was the age that Annie was meant to be when I first auditioned for the Boys, which was funnily enough my audition scene for the Seven. So my sort of upbringing on the show has been very much simultaneous to Annie's, and there have been some meta components, right? Because Annie joins the Seven, and it is this very notorious group of superheroes, and there is this rise to, a notoriety that she's not entirely comfortable with, that isn't totally natural. And at the same time, it's an opportunity. And I would say that my situation is far more lush and privileged and just overall fun, and just
Sure.
it entails none of the conflicts that Annie is going through, fortunately, right? Because it could. But as I've grown and as I've had human experiences, it's definitely infused Annie with what I hope to be some humanity, because ultimately it's a superhero show about humans, right? So the
Sure.
more human experiences I have, the more I'm able to use them for characters, and particularly hers. It's
Sure.
fortunate, it's cathartic once again.
Are there any particular moments from this past season that you're proud of, whether it be emotional or physical?
I would say that yeah, I would say the shifter part is definitely the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I was terrified of it. The stakes were so high. And I'm in retrospect really happy that I took it on. The physical component, the fight with myself, was so hard that I almost feel like the entire experience I remember in theory, but I sort of have almost blacked out because it required total immersion of my mind, body, soul. And I remember when it happened, when I found out about that storyline, I was just so anxious. And even throughout it, I was
Mhm.
so anxious. I wish I could say I had fun with it, but the antidote to the anxiety was just working my ass off in terms of the prep, in terms of being present with it. But I think for me, it was honestly creating this really cool synergistic relationship with Eric Kripke, and just working our asses off to make that storyline work, and
Sure.
knowing it's going to be so difficult, but both being so invested. It ultimately becomes, for me at least, who I work with, and these fun moments of just like making characters come alive and storylines come alive, and doing that in the way that we did was just so much fun. And so I would say that would be it, was that dual character moment, the scene that we had together. I say we because it's, those two characters, and it
Sure.
still feels like it was like a two-person scene. And the scene where I fought myself was something that I didn't know if I could do. So just having it come out and having it like be in the episode and know that Kripke was satisfied with it ultimately is one of the most satisfying moments I could possibly have, let alone people watching it. And I just, yeah, to this day, it feels like a moment that I blacked out. But yeah, I remember these visceral moments of just hard work and just feeling in the zone as the shifter, and having so much fun as the shifter, having
Sure.
an unusual um, but distinct amount of fun as this sociopath.
Well, I know you're busy. I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck with season five. I love the show. It's really happy for you, and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really
Appreciate it.
appreciate it. It was great
Thanks a lot,
chatting.
guys. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.